Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming back to the stage our host, John Billings.
All right, welcome back, everyone. What a great morning so far. And we've got two more phenomenal speakers for you here today before we wrap this up. Our next speaker is Andrew Herbert. He's the Chief Stamping Engineer of the Stamping Business Unit for Ford. He began his career at Ford as a stamping and assembly engineer, graduate trainee in 1985. He has been with Ford Motor Company for 40 years and currently serves as Chief Stamping Engineer. His expertise lies in implementing lean, quality, maintenance, and safety processes worldwide in both plant and staff setting that achieve high-end results. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Andy.
Thanks, John. Well, good morning. I'm not going to take credit for 40 years, but I'll take credit for 30 years. So, yeah, to 85 to 2015, I'm in that math mode. I got math all figured out there. So, I just like to thank everybody for coming. I appreciate it. I'm a little nervous here this morning. I had my back to everybody. I thought there was only 5 of us at the table, so to see everybody else here is so thanks. Just a little bit about myself and the Stamping Business Unit before I get started and what we're responsible for. We're here talking about controls this morning, but I have responsibility in North America for all the stamping dies that we put in process for all new model programs and also for all the stamping equipment that we launched. So this year we launched, at Dearborn, we launched 4 new press lines, 2 new blankers, 1 straight cut, and all new controls in all of our equipment. So we have all that, plus we have hydroforming, machining and hydroforming, chem-treat. So it's a pretty diverse organization to where it was 30 years ago. And 30 years ago it was, we made parts that go up and down. And when you think of stamping, what do you think of? What do you look at when you go to a dealership to buy a vehicle? What's the first thing that draws you to the vehicle? It's the lines on the vehicle. That's what we do. We don't put the paint on, but we make the metal or aluminum in our case. So a little bit about me. 30 years, as John said, all of it in manufacturing. The last 16 years as plant manager, 2 different plants. And most recently, 6 months ago, I moved to this role. So this is an entirely new role for me and for us as a company. So with that, I'll get into the presentation. So I guess I have controls. I can push the button myself. So we've seen that one, talked about that. That is our new F-150 in case anybody hasn't seen it. Just if I can sell a few today, that would be good for me. Make my wages for the day. So what are we going to talk about today? Some of the growth of our machine controls, the diversity that we have in our control suppliers, the global footprint we see, the vision, some of the benefits of our standards, and then our roadmap for control standards. This slide kind of depicts the top left where you see wiring there. When I came to my last plant 8 years ago, I walked in the plant. We still had tubes in one of the presses. So it's not just wiring. We're running off of tubes. When you think of black and white TV, that's the kind of tubes we had in our presses. And then now all the way up to Siematic S7 and TIA Portal. We're putting that age of equipment, and we'll talk about some of the advantages of why we're doing that as we move forward. And so you look at this slide, and this slide depicts all the different controls that we have within our equipment, and really just depicted by the bottom line. And this example is actually out of the plant that I ran. We had an A line. It had 5 different presses in it, 3 types of presses, 4 drive systems, 5 types of controls, 4 types of automation, and within that, 3 types of controls and 4 drive systems. That's on one line. So you can think about it if you're the person trying to run that line and many other lines, you got a little bit of a problem there. So just kind of an example of why we're doing what we're doing. And our footprint, you look at our footprint, we're in the U.S., we have 10 plants. In Europe, we have 5 plants. In Asia Pacific, we have 8 plants. And I'm missing one. We're somewhere else too. We have 26 facilities. So across the globe, global footprint is what we're trying to put in place with our standards that we've developed. And then you look at the vision that we have. Controls in the past used to be very select, very small part of our business, and now it goes across the PLCs, the motion controls, the human-machine interface. You know, we're putting controls in place to help the people that are running the lines, right? Because you go up and you used to have to get so deep into the program that only the best electricians in the business could do what we needed them to do. And so now we're trying to standardize all that across the board. This is just an example of how deep we're going. You can see some of the words up there, bolsters, we got die clamps, we got lifts, we got transfer cylinders. Every aspect of getting the part from the front of the line when it goes in as a blank form or a coil form all the way out to the back end of the line where people are pulling that part off the belt. We have a part of that in our controls environment. And that's where we're working with Siemens to standardize that across the globe. And what are some of the benefits? These are our objectives on the left-hand side. We have objectives in safety, quality, delivery, cost, people, and maintenance. And as you look at it, when we have common controls across the business, safety becomes much easier. People in the quality and delivery side of the business, when you're going from, you know, in the plant that I ran, I had 22 press lines. I had a prog press. I had a blanking press. You know, when somebody would be called to work a weekend and they'd go from one line down to 20, well, we called it 27 line, but we only had 22 lines, but go down to 27 line, it's a totally different line. And you think back to the first example I talked about, just one line alone, you had to be an expert in multiple different controls. Now, how do you do that, right? And so as you look at changing the environment within Ford Motor Company, we impact every single one of these. And as we partner up with companies like Siemens to do that, you make the business easier to run. You know, you can bring somebody in, whether it's during the week or whether it's on a weekend or a shutdown, people can help themselves. Instead of us calling in the OEM suppliers, I mean, we're calling up Siemens, we're calling up Allen Bradley on the weekends, midnight, we get a breakdown, you know, hey, you know, can you come in and help us? Oh, no, they're out in Iowa. They can't come and help you, right? And then we're dead. And the name of our game is making parts, right? That's what we do. So, and some of the roadmap, you know, we leverage one for it. Across the globe, it's the same format. So the things that Alan Mullally started when he came to the company, he's since retired, but we've leveraged that. We're leveraging that. We actually started with our powertrain counterparts, started with Siemens 15 years ago now, and we're taking that knowledge that they've given us, and we're working with them to get a common platform for us that's very similar to what they do. We're connected globally across the SBU, so the plants that I mentioned before. And then we have the opportunity within our controls now to improve across the standards because, as I mentioned before, you know, within a plant we had problems, but what we had between plants was a problem too. You know, I ran 2 different plants for the company, and in those plants I had my experts. Well, one expert liked Allen Bradley, somebody else liked something else, right? So you go to one plant and it's entirely different than the next plant. So you couldn't even call for help if you need it from another plant because they wouldn't know it. You know, and so you talk about continuous improvement. Getting that same standard really helps us as an organization move from one plant to the next. Utilizing dedicated suppliers like Siemens to help us do that across the board because they have the expertise globally. They have the ability at different places in the country, to be able to come and help us if we need help. And then growing the aligned and database or the aligned OEM base, right? To get the best in world manufacturing. And this is just a couple pictures. This is really only the exterior view. This doesn't have anything to do with controls. This is a pictorial of 2 different presses. One's in Michigan, one's in Buffalo. One's a brand new Fagor press on the left. The other one's a 30-year-old press in Buffalo that we rebuilt, put the same controls in. We have common, across the board we have commonization, right? So whether it's the color of the presses, color of the floors, the controls, right? Across the board, we're trying to standardize. So if we go from one plant to the next, it doesn't matter. You have the same ability to run your business. And here's just another slide. This is a 5-year-old Schuler press down in South America. And this last one is a brand new Gear press that we put in North America. And you can see, again, that's just the external view. It doesn't have anything to do with us as a business on the control side. But it gives you that common platform. And that's really what we're trying to do with Siemens and our other global suppliers is how do we get to a common platform across the board. Because the name of our game, as I said before, is to make parts. And any way we can make parts faster by giving our experts on the floor the ability to work with themselves, work with the systems that we have is much, much faster. So with that, I think that's my last slide. So, you know, they put manufacturing between everybody else because I get to make up time. You know, it's just like being on the floor. You know, I made up time for George and Brian to help them out and, you know, to give our next speaker some time. So that I think, yeah, it's all about efficiency. So I think that's my last slide.
We actually have some questions.
Oh, okay, good.
So if you don't mind.
All right.
So the first question, what are some lessons that the SBU has learned from your powertrain organization?
Well, number one, just having somebody that's been there and done that. Talking to Mike Bastian the other day, who's actually here, you know, some of the things that we pull from each other is, well, how have they gotten funding to do some of what we do? But that's one aspect of it. The other is the ability to call somebody up that already has a common platform, call them up and say, hey, I really got this issue. You got anybody that can help me out? You know, it could be in the front end, it could be in the virtual world, it could be on the back end down on the floor. So the ability to have the company access to talk to people instead of having to go right to the suppliers.
Great. The other question is, what steps is Ford taking to attract young talent to backfill an aging workforce?
Well, that's a fair question. That's actually a really good question. And as a part of that, what we've done as in our environment, I graduated from Ohio State. All those of you that from Ohio, that would be something. But those of you from Michigan could care less. But you know, I recruit down at Ohio State, so we have leadership members assigned to our major schools that we go to recruit. And one of the things that we've really started to do is, and this is from the engineering side, I can't talk about from the economist side or from anywhere else, but from an engineering side, we like product. We want to see product. So what we do is we take the latest and the greatest products down to these schools, and we talk to kids. I can't call them kids. They're 20, 22-year-old people getting ready, young men and women getting ready to graduate. They want to see what product's out there. You know, when I started with the company in 1985, what enticed me to come to Ford over GM or Chrysler was the 1983 T-Bird, right? It was turbocharged, right? It had intercoolers on it. I mean, that was it, right? Well, that's what our young engineers want to see. It doesn't matter whether they're in controls or whether they're in, they want to build dies or whether they want to run parts. They want to see what product are they taking part in to get our product out to the customer. So,
great.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job. Thank you, Andy. What a great example of how Ford Stamping is innovating. And I go back to the comment I made to you about a week ago when we met. I'm still amazed you're 40 years in the business. You look great, by the way. All right, our next speaker, our keynote speaker, he is the ignition of innovation. He is the intellectual can of Red Bull. The founder of TreadHunter.com, the world's largest trend website. He is one of the most sought-after keynote speakers on the planet and well-regarded as a top trend spotter in the world. It's an honor to have him share his thoughts with us this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jeremy Gutsche.
All right, thank you very much. Well, I'm here today to make you better and faster. I'm going to make you better at adapting to change, and I'm going to make you faster at finding your new ideas. But here's the extra things that I got from John and team. They said, I'm also the guy that's supposed to get you a little rowdy, a little excited, especially in those back rows. So what do you guys think? Are you ready to get a little rowdy about manufacturing in America? All right, well, I should also say you invited a Canadian. So when I saw your previous economist say, oil up there, we can take them. It's like, I'm watching you. I'm reporting back. We're going to go to our hockey rink, and we're going to take everything you say here and think about it. And then not do anything. Politely say thank you. But let me begin with a puzzle. Human hearts, rocket ships, scorpions, and origami. A lot of engineers in the room. What's the connection? if you could see it, if you could connect those dots, I can make you better at everything. Better innovator, better creator, better at adapting. But there's a little bit of a catch that impacts you. You see, your great idea, your big breakthrough, it's so close within your grasp, but you have hundreds of choices that you need to make each day, each week, each month. And those start to become overwhelming. So in an era of change, how do you know if you're making the right choice? People don't internalize it, but we're experiencing history's highest rate of change, especially in manufacturing, and yet our brain is still the product of 10,000 years of evolution as a farmer. And that comes with a series of traps we'll get into, traps that block us from adapting to change, traps that cause great icons, smart teams, successful people to miss out on opportunity right in front of them. I've spent the last decade studying chaos and working with about 400 brands, billionaires, CEOs, a good number of them in auto as well. And my job is to help you adapt faster. I'm going to make you better and faster today in two ways. I'm going to make you better by showing you some of those neurological traps that tend to block successful teams from adapting, and faster by showing you 6 patterns of opportunity that we've learned at Trend Hunter by studying 250,000 ideas using our audience of 100 million people like a giant innovation focus group to be more predictive, more scientific about how to actually help people find ideas. So that's the pitch. That's what we're going to get into. But the thing is, because this is a fun conference, because you actually have robots playing basketball that were just made by your students, like that's amazing, I need to crank this up a bit. So we can either do Fortune 500 brands for our lessons if you want, but I figured we, with this group, maybe we do the advanced session. Maybe we use bears, the business of ugly, video games, rap stars, retro billionaires, and maybe even some ex-criminal entrepreneurs. But this is the multiple choice section, so you've got to pick. What do you guys want to learn from today? Do you want to learn from Fortune 500s or ex-criminals? Oh, you got to be loud. What do you want? Criminals, all right. We'll take the path of the criminal. What's the difference? That's good. Well, it's actually insightful because, you see, a Fortune 500 brand used to last for 75 years when people would graduate into their jobs and choose a blue chip, choose manufacturing, choose big auto. They were choosing a path that they were bonded to for their entire careers. But today, everything's different. The average lifespan of a Fortune 500 has now fallen to just 15 years. It's expected to drop further. And when you even think of millennials, the talent that you're recruiting with that T-Bird or whatever the new innovative car is going to be, the game's changed. It's quite a lot different. So if companies are failing to adapt, and that's not just sort of a recession thing, what I want to spend time with you today on is how chaos works. And we're going to use examples that aren't in auto. I'm going to use examples like customer, meaning your internal customer, who you're recruiting, all sorts of different angles to this. And I'm going to push you a little bit. I'm going to start with this little problem. Human hearts, rocket ships, scorpions, and origami. Those seem unrelated, but not to Robert Lang, an origami expert for hire who uses the power of paper folding to change lives. Now, he's actually remarkably close to your world, but I'll give you the clues of how he got to his expertise. We'll build it up just a little bit. When Robert was a kid, he got that book on origami. Maybe some of the engineers in the room obsessed about that book, but when I got that little book, I crumpled up little things that looked horrible, and I realized engineering was not for me. But Robert obsessed. He thought of things in way different ways. He loved that origami, and sure, he ended up getting a job at NASA. All right, whatever. Maybe he has 23 patents to his name. But by night, he was obsessed with the Japanese underworld of competitive origami. His true engineering feats were to try and figure out the origami impossibilities that the great masters had never solved. In particular, the thing that really kept him going was trying to figure out how do you fold the black scorpion with a single piece of paper. And I know what some of you are thinking, especially like our chief engineer at Ford is like, what? That is absolutely the same as a stamping challenge. I'm all over that. So the two would have loved thinking about that black scorpion. And what Robert thought is he thought with all innovation, your great idea, your breakthrough, it's actually closer than you usually think. And there are patterns and clues around you that you could tie together in a different way to get to your solution. But too often we overlook those patterns. We miss out on those clues. So for this example, he started looking at that little scorpion and just forgetting how he'd gotten to folding in the first place. Just start from scratch. What are the shapes? How do we just build it up from its basic parts? Pretty soon, he codes up a program that would later be dubbed the secret weapon in the origami underworld. And he figures out how to fold that little scorpion in a single piece of paper. The world of origami is forever changed. The average number of folds in regular competition goes from 30 per piece of paper to over 100. All of that leads you to that fateful day where you pick up the phone and you say, Mom, remember that job at NASA thing? You know, those student loans and stuff? Guess what? I've decided to fold paper full time. And then you hang up really quickly. When a newspaper interviewed him, he said, well, you know, there are plenty of people doing lasers, but the things I could do in origami. And sure enough, when NASA needed to figure out how to fold a satellite to get it inside the shuttle, they needed to call back Robert Lang. When a stent maker needed to figure out how you would fold a little stent to unravel in a heart valve to save lives, they needed Robert Lang's origami. The reason we have 13 airbags in the luxury vehicles prepared by people in this room comes in part to techniques he's made with those airbag manufacturers. And when bioengineers stack the human genome, they use Robert Lang's secret weapon. When I interviewed Robert, what he said to me was that almost all innovation happens by making connections between fields that other people didn't realize. And those last 4 words, those are actually the insight. Because unfortunately, most people will miss out. And that's not something that's like motivating. We're here to talk about innovation, but realistically, there are so many little breakthroughs that we could have that are so close within our grasp. So how do you push yourself? How come we miss out? And what I've been looking into and sort of studying for my next book is the idea that after 10,000 years of evolution as farmers, once you find your field of opportunity, whether it's your career, your go-to technique, the way to build a car, once you have that process, we're sort of pre-wired to repeat and optimize all of the decisions that led to last year's harvest. So how do you break free? And let me give you a couple examples just to back this up. I interviewed this guy, Steve Sasson from Kodak. He invented the digital camera in 1975. By 1976, he had a paper he was circulating on how we will store photos on memory cards, watch our pictures on TVs, and share pictures over the phone lines. He had that paper in by 1976. I'm going to tell you a bit more about his story a bit later in my interview with him. BlackBerry popularized the smartphone, fallen Canadian brand. But the thing about it is they defended their business market so much that they never saw the knockout punch of the consumer market basically taking them out. Another example, Blockbuster Video had 3 chances to buy Netflix, but they didn't. The truth behind Blockbuster is they were one of the most successful retail chains in history. They were started by a warehousing and database expert. His expertise was figuring out how to perfectly optimize, and he actually structured each retail store to stock inventory that would reflect the taste of the customers in each specific location. It was stuff far ahead of its time. That meant they did experiment with models very similar to Netflix, including their own on-demand streaming. And Netflix wanted to sell for $50 million 3 times, but Blockbuster decided to close out, retreat their online business, and focus on retail where they were kings. Anyone know what those are? They're books! And actually, Encyclopedia Britannica. Encyclopedia Britannica was approached by Bill Gates. He wanted to digitize them, but they said, this is the sum of human knowledge. You will not bastardize our leather books, sir. And he said, all right, I'll just buy you. They're like, we're not for sale. Move on. So eventually he buys Funk & Wagnalls, which was sold out of grocery stores. It didn't really have the brand. But he adds pictures, and it turns into Encarta. Now, Encarta was the most commercially successful encyclopedia of all time. But actually, it did something much bigger. This was a chess piece, because this was bundled with Windows 95, and it helped reposition the family computer from being a nerdy little toy to being a device for family learning. And that changed Bill, good old Billy, to go from being a billionaire to a tens of billionaire. But fast forward 4 or 5 years from that date, and imagine this internet thing coming about. When presented with the question, they didn't want to digitize and put things away for free because this still meant so much to them, and it was still this important piece of Bill Gates' history. So a bunch of amateurs start putting together a website. It's Wikipedia. Pretty soon they're the 7th most popular website in the world, excluding pornography. And Encarta decides to close its doors basically last year. My last example for you is the inventor of grammar checkers, spell checkers, the laptop word processor. Smith Corona spent a year selling computers in a joint venture with Acer. But then they looked at their business and they decided to make a manufacturing play. They decided to relocate operations to Mexico, which was the largest NPV project at the time. They bundled down a little bit and retreated out of their partnership with Acer. When they did, they said, there's still a strong market for our products, is the CEO's quote, strong market for our products in the United States and the world. And they decided that they would specialize in becoming the best typewriter company in the world. And they still are today. Now, Smith Corona, Blockbuster, BlackBerry, these examples are all quite interesting because in each case, they were very successful teams. They were icons of innovation, and they repeated and protected and optimized their field of opportunity. They farmed. What makes them even more astonishing is that each of them developed a breakthrough or revolutionary technology, but they retreated out because they were focusing on their core business. They pulled out of markets they created, missing out on big potential. They teach us that we repeat whatever led to last year's harvest. We farm. The way out of this would be to awaken your inner hunter, to hunt, and to capture opportunity. That sounds real easy when I list it out as a little list, but awakening your inner hunter means thinking about all the things you can do to entice those millennials to come up with new ideas, to create a business where people are actively trying to experiment and it's okay to fail. It's not always that easy. Hunting means how much of your week and your team's week are you actually spending investigating new technology, different industries, concepts you can bring back, actively hunting. And finally, capturing opportunity is about taking the idea and making it a reality. And the sad thing is that each of these companies actually all had great ideas. So often we have a meeting, there's great ideas in it, but nothing actually happens. So how do you action? It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. A Charles Darwin quote, sort of. I learned that's basically a summary, and when you go to fact check for your book, he never said it, although it's always a quote everywhere, so it's generally a summary of what he thinks. Anyway, let's actually draw this in with 2 examples. I'm going to show you 2 examples from retail. So we're going to go out of auto and manufacturing for a little bit, and you're going to see a farmer versus a hunter, and I want you to pay attention to how the psychology of the innovator evolves throughout their success. The first guy is Roy. Now, Roy always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but he was actually a marketer selling Vicks. And nobody likes cough syrup, not even that kid, even though he's smiling. It's stock footage. You never know. Roy wanted to just simply find any concept. So he goes to the mall, he's walking around, he's looking for something, and pretty soon he's in the intimate apparel section of the department store. While he's there, he decides, maybe I'll get something for my wife. But when he's sitting there, he feels like he's being stared at like an unwanted intruder, in his words. It's for my wife, I swear! He gets up, he leaves, he goes into his American-made car. I made that detail up, but let's just assume. And he had 2 insights. The first is that what if there was a shop for men to buy lingerie? Or, sorry, for men to buy lingerie for women. That's totally different. But the second insight was, what if we, in this store, sold fashionable lingerie? Well, that would make men happy. So he took his idea and he made a store. And pretty soon he was making money. So he decided to make another store, another, and he starts repeating and optimizing. And now he's a millionaire and things are working out. How do we take this from 6 stores to hundreds of stores? But the problem is, all along, he was slightly wrong. You see, he was never successful for making a store that was geared towards men. That's certainly what he thought, but it actually had nothing to do with it. His success was rooted in the fact that he was selling the first fashionable lingerie brought to America. But it wasn't about making men happy. It was actually about making women feel confident. And that's subtly different. Some of the guys in the room might not get that, but that's entirely different. You know, actually, if I even draw a parallel, there's been a lot of really cool stuff. GM's actually been getting their designers to dress up in drag to get in the cars so they can better try and understand how different a woman's psychology is. Not just one thing. But in this example with Roy, what happened that was sensationally different is that the department stores started adding their own fashionable lingerie, and that's actually where women preferred to shop. This caused his sales to plummet, and he was now headed for bankruptcy. So he had to figure out a way to sell his little chain for peanuts. His store was Victoria's Secret. He sells it for a rumored $4 million. The new owners immediately reposition everything towards the female shopper, and they turn their little $4 million investment into a $6 billion mega brand. So Roy missed a $6 billion opportunity, but in truth, Roy was successful. He became a millionaire. He sold his business for a nice sum of money, and the interesting thing is that you and I don't have somebody else to come in and do our job remarkably better, to show us what we're missing out. Roy has that. But the similarity between us and Roy would be the traps of the farmer. When Roy or the rest of us become successful, we do become complacent. We lose some of that hunger that we had when we were first graduating from school, building robots to play basketball downstairs, in our free time. Next up, Roy became repetitive, and he wanted to repeat and optimize what was working in the past. That's something we do in business. It's a natural part of business, but it can start to hinder our ability to adapt. So we need to have a keen eye on our repetition. And finally, Roy obviously became protective of his insight. And that was kind of a weird one because he could, with his success and his millions, never imagine that his store should be targeted towards women. He was a millionaire because he'd made that decision. So what's the opposite of this? Well, I'm going to play a little game of Guess Who with you to sort of show us a different example. We've got this guy here, and I don't know if anyone recognizes him yet. If you do, you can shout his name. He's a 77-year-old male, and he lives in a small Spanish village, A Coruña. And if you look at him, he might just look like a regular dude on the street. He works really hard. He wears the same blue outfit all the time. He eats lunch at the same place. He's got a condo that's pretty close to the factory where he works. And he would like to get a house, but then he'd have to move further away. Now, the only extra little deal is that he's worth more than all of these characters combined, because he is Amancio Ortega, and he's worth $70 billion. Now, Amancio is the founder of Zara. From the outside or in a shopping mall, this might look like a fashion store to you, but I'm going to show you how their success is, in fact, in manufacturing, and it is about the future of business. Louis Vuitton calls Zara the most innovative and devastating retailer in the world. Previous to Zara, every fashion house was run by a very fashionable and stylish man. This one is run by good old Amancio and his blue outfit, the same blue outfit every day. But here's what's different. When you go in that store and you see a little red dress, it only took that dress 2 weeks to be manufactured, designed, and show up in the store. At every other fashion house, it takes 12 months for that process to happen. But Zara can do it in 14 days because someone designs the little dress. They send it to Amancio. Amancio is always working. They do not outsource to China because that would take too long. They skip all advertising campaigns because all they're going to do is make 5 of those little dresses for each of their 2,000 stores. When the dress shows up in that store and you walk up to it and you're a young woman, this is where the magic happens. Someone will come up to you and say, hey, do you like this dress? No, I don't like the stripe on it. Okay. At the end of every day, the storekeeper goes to their terminal and writes, dress 446 did not like the stripe. The designers only made the stripe 2 weeks ago. They're not particularly bonded to it, so they remove that stripe. They make 5 new dresses, and all 5 dresses go to all of the 2,000 stores. There is no rollout. Everything is about experimentation and adaptation, and they save money on not having to advertise, but they also create a sense of urgency. If If you're a young woman and you like that dress, you better buy it today because you will never see it again, and you don't have to worry about your friend having the same dress. The Guardian did a story, and I like this. They said that having a Zara is the signifier of a stylish city. Even better, they found a 16-year-old girl to interview about the expansion of Zara. And put up your hand if you have a teenager in the house. Does anyone have a teenager? So think of your teenager, imagine a teenage girl, and they find her, and she says this about Zara. She goes, "Thank God we won't have to be a third world fashion country anymore." Now, I would like to find her and be able to say, "Hey, guess what? That's the guy that made your dress." And he wears the same blue outfit every single day. For Mancio, the daily task is marked by self-improvement and a search for new opportunity. That's his motto and the motto for all of Zara. Zara's a fashion company, but it wins because of its manufacturing timelines and the strategy that it's brought to that game. All of this helps make Mancio better and faster. If we compare him to Roy, instead of being complacent, Zara is insatiable, which basically means they never think they're done. They're always in a process of adaptation. Instead of being repetitive, they're curious. They will try and experiment with almost anything. Look up like weird Zara designs online and you'll see some of the spectacular failures. Finally, instead of being protective, they're willing to destroy. Now we're going to get into each of these because they're not so easy, especially the last one. But I want to start with a really serious and important question. It's a competitive question, though. Do we have like winners in this room? Do you have anyone here that likes to win? Yeah? Are you guys competitive? Feel that sense of urgency. I want you to feel that this question matters to you more than anyone in the room, and then I want you to win it. Here we go. Be loud. Question is, who's the greatest rapper of all time? Jay-Z, Eminem. Eminem's a solid Detroit answer. Keeping it local. Kanye West is so upset you didn't mention his name yet. Who else? Keep guessing. Hammer. Beastie Boys. I'll let it go for a little bit, but we have a winner. MC Hammer. You guys thought I was joking when I said he won. MC Hammer was the greatest of all time because he had the Empire. He had 2 767 jets to fly his 500-person entourage around. They had a $300,000 a month salary just for the entourage. Why? Because Hammer Time was going to last forever. Only it didn't, or we'd all be wearing those pants. On an individual level, it's interesting to study Hammer because he didn't just have one album, he had 11. He actually had 8 dot-com startups, many of them venture capital funded, but he just kept on going millionaire bankrupt, millionaire bankrupt. He shows us that human nature is to assume the status quo will last forever, and it'd be easy to say that's just one guy, but I'm going to dial this up to the corporate level. First, though, while we're in a stadium, 78% of NFL players go bankrupt within 5 years of playing. This keeps on getting repeated. They understand the pattern. They get trained in a room just like this on how to manage their money, which will be gone soon. And watch ESPN's Broke, and you'll still see they all say, well, got to get my mama house, got to get my bling, got to get my boat, got to get my gas station. They all want like gas stations down. I don't know why. But now let's dial this up to a corporate level. BlackBerry, MySpace, Smith Corona. What you actually start seeing is that at a corporate level, the mistakes become much bigger and much more expensive. Marketing misspend, not adapting fast enough, losing millennial talent. These things cost a lot more than MC Hammer's fortune. Your success fuels complacency. So how do you break out of it? How do you become more of an insatiable company like Zara's? Well, I'm going to give you guys a couple homework questions as I go along. You can download them later. I'll give you a link. But to think about your team and your own insatiability, how often do you experiment with ideas that might not work? I don't mean a test that you know is going to win. I mean trying something that truly might not work. And finally, how different would your team act if you knew there was another team working 24/7 to eat your lunch? You know, if this is Detroit and you see Tesla coming along, they're a Siemens customer too. But if you see them trying to take a grounds-up approach, or Apple announcing they're going to come out with a car and spend billions on trying to make it, it's easy to dismiss it. But wait a minute, what would they do differently? And can we do that right now to our own company? The next trap I want to talk about is being too repetitive. Is there anyone here, make some noise, or put up your hands, actually, we'll do it that way, if you've ever bought anything on Farmville, Candy Crush, or Angry Birds? Anybody? That's embarrassing. You shouldn't admit that, sir. Well, in truth, many of you probably have. Angry Birds alone made $2 billion in getting you to buy extra levels. Their business model, the freemium model, is in fact something that was invented. There were two buddies, George and Scott, and they wanted to sell video games in the 80s and 90s. So they made shareware, and pretty soon they decided, you know what, let's make our own video game. So they did. And they spent a couple months, and they made Duke Nukem. And pretty soon, they were thousandaires. So what do? You make Duke Nukem 2. Now they're millionaires. So what do next? Duke Nukem 3. Now they're tens of millionaires. So now they're successful. Now they've created an empire, a brand. They're starting to feel and be a little more like the corporations in this room. But because they have something to protect, when they come up with their new concept for Duke Nukem Forever, they decided not to release it. They made a game. Everybody loved it. Fans went wild. But then at a gaming convention, somebody else unveiled a new platform you could code your program on, a new gaming engine. It's almost like the engineering of the game. And they figured, you know what, we could have done this better. So let's scrap everything and let's start again from scratch. They spent 3 or 4 more years re-engineering the game to look the same but be better. They get ready to launch. There's a new gaming platform. You know what? We're millionaires. We have a brand to protect. This is the best video game of all time. Let's do this again. Scrap everything. Boom. Start again. Duke Nukem took 6 months and cost $300,000 to make. Duke Nukem Forever, aptly named, took 15 years and burned all of their $22 million. And when it launched, it was 15 years later. Think of how much has changed in the video game industry in 15 years, so the video game flopped. They teach us that when we're successful, we repeat and optimize and repeat and optimize and repeat and optimize in our pursuit of perfection, but that can actually lead to irrelevance. Obviously, in auto, I'm not saying you're going to abandon safety measures and all this wonderful stuff, but think about other processes of your business, how you run your team, how you recruit young talent, how you innovate or try and come up with new concepts, and ask yourself where you're overly repetitive. Because this thing has taken out a lot of different companies. And it happens to smart people because we overestimate our sense of control. The way out of this is to fuel your curiosity. Think of that guy, Robert Lang, and ask yourself questions like, how much time do you actually spend in your week hunting new opportunities? And if not you, what percentage of your team is actually hunting for new concepts from outside your market? And finally, how many ways could you connect the dots or rebuild your business? As an exercise, if you brought your team in and just tried to reinvent from scratch a couple times in an afternoon, how many different ways would you come up with? The last traps I have for you here are about being protective. And this is the thing that impacts successful people the most. At Kodak, Steve Sasson, when I interviewed him, I thought he would talk about the missed opportunities and how regretful he was about how it all played out when they went bankrupt. And he said, no, actually, I loved my time at Kodak. It was awesome. OK, well, what was the problem then? And he said to me, a company's great culture is the seed to its own destruction. Sort of badass quote, but what he meant was that it's not just rules, policies, and procedures, but even culture we create to protect the status quo. And at Kodak, that culture was about the Kodak quality print. And it actually was about owning the entire manufacturing chain. They had the chemicals, they had the paper, they had the print, they had the developing, they had the machines, and all of that together meant with silver halide, they could guarantee you a Kodak quality print. The digital camera, they got excited about. He actually, in his first week of debuting it, got invited up to the CEO's office, took everybody's picture. Everybody knew about this. It wasn't a secret. It wasn't forgotten. By the late 90s, they even invented a website where you could socially share pictures of your face with your friends online. That'll never work. Pull the plug. And the simple reason why was that in digital, because they couldn't control that full manufacturing chain, they felt they couldn't ensure the Kodak quality print. And that's what led them to miss out on opportunity. This, of course, impacts a lot of different companies. And to break out, to adapt, you really need to understand when it's time to let go. You know, one of our clients at Adidas, the head of innovation there, they realize that when people on the team put so much effort into a new idea, they don't ever let it go, or they keep on bringing their failed idea into the next meeting in a slightly different permutation. So actually, they will host a funeral. If you've been working on a project for a year, and it just happens to be the one that didn't work out, all right, well, we're going to have a funeral party for your idea. And this is the day we say goodbye. But also thank you for what you've done. The other way, though, out more tactically, is to think about what you're doing to create a way that you could destroy what's worked in the past. And we could do this lesson with a bear and a bear fighter. Or if you want, we could do a kitten. What do you guys want to do? What would you rather fight, a bear or a kitten? All right, a bear. Someone said kitten back there. That's not nice. Well, this guy here, he wanted to fight a bear. So he makes a suit, gets his friend to knock him over, throw him off the cliff, run him over with their cars, and beat him up with baseball bats to prepare for the bear. Here we go. Oh, now I'm ready. And I'm not going to find any lesson that's useful from this guy in itself, but I interviewed the director of the movie about him. And in film, when a director goes to make a documentary, it's an interesting creative process because they don't have a storyline. They have to figure out what the storyline is. And when I interviewed the award-winning director who made this, he said, the problem is that you get fixated on your greatest idea. In film, that means your greatest piece of footage. If you saw the best footage of Grizzly Man, you would lose all empathy for the character. He'd seem ridiculous, and you wouldn't want to watch after you'd seen a little bit. But if he removes it, if he deletes it, if he throws that out, he creates a narrative where you find the character compelling. You start seeing some of his challenge and quest as being similar to yours. So his lesson was in everything for innovation. Think about what would happen if you took your best idea and had to start off from scratch. That same concept is applied in a lot of industries. This is the famous kitchen of Eric Rippert, celebrity chef and the longest-standing Michelin star restaurateur in America. If you go to his restaurant, you might find and see his secret in action. He says that it's easier to earn a Michelin star than it is to keep it. Because to keep it, you must adapt. To earn it, you could be a one-hit wonder. So when you go in that restaurant, if you say, hey, I'd like the chicken cordon bleu, did you look at your menu? No, I got to get Eric. So Eric comes there, and he'll say, hey, how come you ordered the chicken cordon bleu? You didn't look at the menu. And you'll say, oh, I heard it's really good here. Thanks for coming to the table. I'm so excited for it. OK, we will never have that dish again. What do you mean? Would you like a different chicken dish? That guy over there has the chicken dish. I can see it. Yeah, I don't want a signature dish, and you're coming in here to recognize it. So I've thrown that dish away. I'll never make it again. That seems so painful. But then Eric takes that concept, goes back to the kitchen, tries new thoughts, mixes around new spices, thinks about what he's been trying, comes up with a new chicken dish, and he adapts. And although it seems like he's thrown away a lot of important recipes, because he's done this thousands of times, he's now one of the most adaptive chefs in the world. He is just like Zara. If Zara can adapt to fashion, he adapts to food. Break free from past success. All of this concept is like the phoenix, destroying to recreate, recreating from your own ashes. And that phoenix meant something to a woman named Joanne. Joanne was top of her class, but then she didn't get in the university she wanted. She got married, but then it didn't work out. She got a job, but then it fell apart. And then her mom died, and life wasn't going too well, so she moved back to her hometown and said, you know what, forget what I was doing. I'm going to go back to what I wanted to do when I was a kid. I'm going to write. I'm going to write a book with a phoenix in it. Boom, billionaire author. And today, J.K. Rowling is successful enough to do whatever she wants, but what she wanted to do was not write about magic and spells anymore. So she wrote a book called Casual Vacancy, and it became a bestseller because she's J.K. Rowling. But it's a murder mystery and a crime novel, and unfortunately that meant that on Amazon, her reviews kind of slaughter. And they say things like this. My 8-year-old read this. I'm disgusted by the sex and drug use. Maybe your 8-year-old shouldn't read it. So what she decides to do is to destroy and recreate. She makes a new identity, Robert Galbraith, and then legally protects the name so no one can figure it out. Eventually, someone's like, whoa, this guy's really good for a first-time author. And boy, he's good at describing female clothing. They connect the dots. Her story comes out, but she's decided to keep on continuing under her name, Robert. These lessons combined teach us to obsess about your next customer, not just the one you have. If your task is how do you recruit young talent, obsess not about your existing workforce because you figured it out. Obsess about those millennials or whatever your challenge might actually be. The questions I'd also push on would be, how much simpler would your business be if you started from scratch? And what if you could no longer do business the same way? Pretend everything fell apart and you actually had to re-dream up your role. Spending time doing that is a useful exercise to prepare you for what could be. Now, with all of these stories, I'm sort of thinking back to my dad because he taught me a lot of these lessons. And when I was writing my book, I interviewed him. And unfortunately, he died of a heart attack. And that sucks. But I got to interview my dad. And that's not something you normally do. So do you guys want to hear the story about my dad? All right. So here's the tale of Sig. So young Sig was born to a poor immigrant family. And they didn't have much. He shared a 700-square-foot house with his two brothers. And one thing they did have was great food. They always ate well. And he's walking through the grocery store, and he sees some Philadelphia cream cheese. And at age 8, he's tall enough to reach for that cheese. He opens it up. He takes a bite. And then his mom's like, what are you doing? We didn't pay for that. She grabs him by the neck, takes him to the storekeeper, and says, I caught this kid stealing. Isn't that your kid? Yeah. What do we do about it? And pretty soon they sentence him to sweep the floor after school for a month. While he's doing that, he can't help but notice that there's scrap leftover food that the store discards that would still be edible, especially in his poor neighborhood. So he strikes up his first business deal to keep sweeping those floors forever in exchange for that food, which he'll sell at discount prices to the delight of his neighbors. And pretty soon, he's the first kid on the block with a leather jacket and a BB gun. He makes the natural expansion to month-old magazines, door-to-door donuts, and school supplies. By age 16, his business empire is growing. He wants more. He gets his name on a lease and becomes a 16-year-old nightclub owner. Problem is, that doesn't seem totally legal, and there's certain hiccups, like getting a liquor license, and so the way around it, he found, was you just rent your club out. You find a group like this, you rent out the club, stay home, make money, do your homework, go to school. One day, though, the religious group that rents the club happened to like a little more than religion. They also like their booze, they like their gambling, and they like their strippers. And that was the day the police decided to pick to see, is this run by a 16-year-old kid? They open the door, and needless to say, they race to his house. He gets grounded forever, but it makes headline news. And to his friends, he's awesome! He's elected student council president immediately. And through this and his next adventures, he always taught me to hunt for overlooked opportunity. Look for opportunity in people and places that others don't give a chance to. And as an example, there was a little club in Calgary called the Roxbury. And when the owners had renovated it, they made a beautiful place, a pool hall, all this wonderful stuff. But they didn't really put the elbow grease into marketing it, that last step. So it went bankrupt, and he picked it up for 10 cents on the dollar. But when he did it not knowing how to run a restaurant. But he did it because he saw a big brick building that faced rush hour traffic. And by converting the outside into a billboard, he'd already made it a break-even business. Then he went and he knocked on 1,000 doors in the neighborhood and says to each one, hey, Harold, I just bought the defunct bar down the street. I don't know anything about how to do this, but do you want to come and have a beer with me? And we'll see if we can figure it out. You do that 1,000 times, and now you have the hot spot, the place where people want to come and hang out with their friend, the owner guy. He taught me through lessons like this: be insatiable, push harder, work smarter, look deeper, act sooner, never give up. Now, at this point in his career, he's got a little kid and then another one, and he wants to turn them into little entrepreneurs. So I have this weird upbringing where every month we would buy every magazine. It didn't matter what magazine it was. It could be about boating, yachts, cars, about every car magazine, actually. That was my favorite category. But we would flip through each page and look for the new innovation section and say, hey, what do you think of this idea? Could you do it in a different market? Okay, but if you could, or like if it was for that reader, do you think that they would like it? And then on the weekend, we would mock stuff up. We'd make remote control cars with rocket engines on them to see which ones started on fire and which ones didn't. And although those never turned into a business idea for me, I do realize now, after he passed and I did this interview, That's obviously the precursor for Trend Hunter. I'm now just doing the digital version of what I did when I was 10. So this taught me to always explore your curiosity and connect the dots, look at other industries, be relentless, and all that wonderful stuff. At this point in his career, he ends up basically lending a small amount of money to the Calgary Stampeder football team. It's the amount of money that it would take to buy a car, to keep it in this room, keep it nice and relative. But the problem is that the previous owner ended up having SEC problems and could no longer be an owner. So in the bankruptcy, they came to my dad and they said, hey, you are right now, by de facto, with the one debt, you could be the owner of this team if you chose to accept it. The only caveat is it loses a couple $1 million a year and only 10,000 people show up to the games. Now, he didn't have the deep pockets to withstand any additional loss. He didn't have that level of success to do what is the worst investment a person can ever do, a pro sports team. But now you know his story. He's that poor kid from the poor neighborhood. This is a shot. This is crazy big. So he accepts it against the warnings of his buddies. And immediately with the players, they start picking up the phones, calling everybody who ever canceled a season's ticket. He will go and shake every person's hand he can. He sits and he figures about 1,000 different seats. He would sit next to you and he'd say, hey, what's your name? Like, what's your story? Like, what do you think we could do better here? And pretty soon, he's just a charismatic guy. You'd be buddies, and he'd say, oh, by the way, do you have any other friends? Yeah. Invite them to the next game or we're going to lose this team. And by doing that over and over and over and over, they went from 10,000 people in average attendance to 35,000, which is selling out the stadium in every game. And in his 6 years, they were first in the West 5 of the 6 times, and they won the Grey Cup, which is our Super Bowl 2 of the 6 times. And in his very final year, when they had to pick the fans who the MVP player was, you're supposed to vote and all that, they scratched off the player names and they wrote his name in, so he won the MVP trophy, even though he never played a game. That's the tale of my dad. Thank you very much. So then bring this back, and he obviously taught me be curious, be insatiable, be willing to destroy. These were the 3 hunter instincts. But for me, I was this guy wanting to be an entrepreneur so badly in a world of chaos and opportunity. How do you pick? And it could be overwhelming. So I ran half a dozen different businesses I tried when I was a student, but none of them felt like what I should really do. I went into consulting to learn how big companies work. I did my MBA, CFA, really just to try and find a business idea. And then I became a director at a bank. I ran their innovation pipeline to find and evaluate ideas and eventually their high-end business. I stumbled upon a couple insights that grew very quickly. It grew into a $1 billion business for them. But I couldn't help but imagine my 12-year-old self and saying, hey, guess what? You grew up to be a banker. Yes! That'd be horrible. I wanted to be a car designer. It's a very different world. So I couldn't help but think there was a different path for me. So I started studying about chaos more, and then in the wee hours of the morning, I built a website which, much like those magazines I read, would let people share ideas. And anyone from around the world could share an idea, but pretty soon there were a ton of us. We'd published 250,000 articles and had a couple billion views. If you then reverse engineered this and thought, hey, this was made by a banker, you'd realize that this is a focus group. This is a research platform. And by measuring the decisions of 100 million people, we've been able to be a lot more predictive at what opportunities are out there. So that started to attract a number of brands. In auto, the first ones being Chrysler, Panasonic Auto, actually. And we started pairing them up with advisors, and about a year later, things really started taking off for us. But through all of this process, what's been the most astonishing learning lesson is it doesn't matter if you're working with Victoria's Secret or Hughes Aerospace, there are certain patterns behind the scenes that tend to be the same in all industries. I think of innovation like a splash in water, and that splash creates ripples of opportunity. So you could either study your competitor and try and do the exact same thing, or you could try and figure out what opportunities they're indirectly creating. Let's give an example. Facebook in 2007 had 50 million users. Google wants to take a shot at it. It's already too late for Google. Google's even just now this month dialing down its Google+. You just can't beat Facebook even in 2007. But what if you looked at what Facebook was creating? Well, it was, in many ways, it was a site for friends, and that was a place to archive photos, their parties, their fun, and basically share their everyday life. If I give you just one pattern, divergence, what's the opposite of that? Well, Facebook's just for friends. There's now an opportunity for something not just for friends. That's Twitter. That's later. If people are archiving all their party photos, do I really want my parents to see that? Something semi-permanent must be created. That's Snapchat, $4 billion years later. And if people are sharing their everyday life, now my stream is flooded with people's horrible cell phone photography. The art of photography is lost and ruined. Something needs to bring the art back. That's Instagram, $1 billion years later. And I can actually give you a couple dozen ideas created by the patterns that Facebook creates. So let's look at some of these patterns. My first question for you, has anyone here, and I want you to be loud and competitive like you were in the day, has anyone here ever run a marathon? Yeah, who'd rather stay at home and drink beer? Yeah. Who'd rather pay to get electrocuted? Oh, that one didn't get any. Usually there's one. Well, some people do pay to get electrocuted. They pay to go through mud baths, get electrocuted, run through fire. This is Tough Mudder. And Will Dean, the creator, thought, why do people do a marathon? It's ridiculous. It's a race with one winner and like 20,000 losers. They don't think that, sorry, didn't mean it like that. A person that does a marathon doesn't think they're a loser, but they did it for their sense of accomplishment. So why is it a timed race? Why is there a ranking? So he made a race that has no time, that has no clock, that you do with your friends, and it's all about accomplishments. You're tagged with an RFID chip, so here's another Facebook opportunity. Let's photograph everyone through every achievement so they can share this when they're done. And people will. They'll humble brag that photo out, and within 2 years, they go, as a company, Tough Mudder, from 0 to $70 million, teaching us to rethink about what people actually want. That's the pattern of acceleration. I'm not going to describe the other ways to get at it or some of the homework questions, because I'm going to leave that as a download for you guys after. The only one I'll give you that's real easy is when you think of what you'd accelerate in your business, think about how you'd answer the question of specifically, why should I choose you? Or what is it exactly that your team is trying to do? And your answer to that question can really change your business outcome. For Will Dean, that meant realizing a marathon is only about completion. The next pattern I have for you is cyclicality. In cars, we could say it's the Mini Cooper. A lot of other American muscle cars, they'll fit with this. Michael Jordan shoes or Mad Men. The thing about all cyclicality, whether it's an economic trend or nostalgia or retro, is that these things seem really obvious in retrospect. The key is to act soon. If I give you a little metaphor, that little sea turtle looks pretty random when you look at it head on. But it's actually on a migration path that's 20,000 miles. It takes 2 years to complete, and it will end up back exactly on the same beach where it was born. It will repeat that same pattern 50 times in its 100-year life. So you can either look close and just see the randomness, or step back to see the pattern. And in your own roles, you become so close to everything that you really do need the exercise of stepping back in order to take things seriously. Step back, look for clues, and act fast. That's cyclicality, and I've got homework questions that I'm going to skip over so that you don't read them. The next one I've got for you is convergence, and we could do this with a crystal meth addict or the guy on the left. I'm just kidding. What do you guys want to learn from, Bill Gates or the meth addict? So David Dell is living the good life. Fast cars, exotic dancers, police chases, crystal meth. This catches up to you. And pretty soon he's in jail. When he's in jail, he thinks, wow, how different would my life be if I joined my dad and my brothers at the sleepy little bakery that they had in Portland. But he's there for a good amount of time. He's there for 10 years. And while he's there, he thinks, I don't know how to reinvent that business, but I'm going to help that family bakery by doing every little tiny thing possible. And every little thing is going to add up. Let's make them organic, local, solar, fair wages, socially good. We can rehabilitate criminals, put it on the label, and like that can be a thing. And then they had a shock brand, Dave's Killer Bread. Not because he killed a man, but this bread was killer good. Within a couple years, they go from being a sleepy family bakery to a $50 million a year business, showing us that you increase your odds of winning by aligning to multiple trends. Now, combining and doing all the little things is certainly what helps with a lot of product design, but convergence can also be mixing things around, adding value in different ways, adding something digital to a physical product like a car, aligning multiple forces, co-branding with another consumer brand, all that wonderful stuff. Now, For this next pattern I'm going to talk about, I'd like to know, is anybody here in love? Ha! This bitter room, we got one guy. I specifically asked that a little quieter, but otherwise, I don't know. Well, there's a guy who was in love. His name was Josh. He came home to his New York City apartment, opened up the doors, and she was gone. All that was left was the ring, so as to say, she's gone forever. So after a while, you think about it again. Okay, I'm just going to return the ring. It's over. Goes down to the store. Sorry, this is a luxury product. You can't return this ring. All right, maybe I'll sell it on eBay. Guess what? People can't tell if it's real. So then he investigates Craigslist and finds that people have gone to parking lots with all of their jewels and not come back. So that doesn't seem like a good idea. So there's already thousands of online jewelers. He adds another, but he calls it I Do? No, I don't! A place for the broken-hearted to unload their jewels. Now, I think that there's something about that brand that seems like it's a little haunted, right? Do I really want, like, there's negativity around my time of buying an engagement ring? But actually, there's millions of Americans who go through divorce every year. And you know what? When they do, now they find this guy's story because he created something irresistible to a specific group of people. But he didn't just have a narrow story. He made a business that connects buyers and sellers, and he added one step in the middle. The extra step, someone who authenticates the jewel. So you send in the money, you send in the jewel, someone looks at it, yep, we're all good, everything transfers over, and pretty soon you've got a $4 million business. Reduction can be simplifying, specializing, taking out layers, making a more fractional business, asking yourself what parts of your business do consumers actually care about. Now, how many ways could we imagine a simpler startup? I want you to fast forward in time. I want you to pretend that you've made such a huge success in auto, you decide to early retire. But now you decide, let's go and live somewhere in Europe for a bit. And you pick a little place called Amsterdam. And while you're there, you need a job. You're getting a little bit too bored. So you start working for the local water utility, which also looks after the canals. But then you notice something kind of weird. On the Queen's Day parade, there's 1 million people that flood the streets and they party, but you start noticing that there's a runaway trend. They are starting to pee in the river, and that's your drinking water. So this is your actual problem. You measure it, you find 18,000 liters of urine went into the drinking water in 6 hours, and it's become a runaway trend. Now you've got about 10 months to figure this out before social media takes it to the next level. You work for the water utility. This is an actual problem you need to do. So do you put up a sign that says, peeing in our drinking water, like, please don't do that? People will pee on your sign and take a picture, selfie, and then it goes viral. So they get inspired by a water gun game and decide to make a game of their own kind. Competitive urination. They put 200 of these stations all around the city. If you're the best, you win your piss diploma. Not just men start doing, women start doing it too. And that little diploma has the logo of the water utility on the bottom to remind you, guess what? That thing last year, that was our drinking water. So they fix the problem more or less and teach us that you can't fight an unstoppable force, but with trends and social media, you can rechannel momentum to your advantage. Redirection is about refocusing, reprioritizing, reversing, gamifying an experience. What big forces or rituals could you rechannel? How could you think about gamifying the experience or surprising that work atmosphere for your millennials as an example? Now this brings me to my final pattern, but it's divergence. It's a little more rebellious, so it's also the one that's the most fun. You can think of Dexter Weeds, Walter White, The Wolf of Wall Street, all anti-heroes, but basically divergence is doing the opposite of the mainstream, because you don't want to be in the mainstream, so why does your customer? And if you look in the market, you can find opportunities in all sorts of different ways. If we even took dolls, do I want to get my daughter princess dolls and have her, grow up to be valuing that, or do I want something different? I posed that question to my little niece, who's just 4, and she said, T-Rexes eat princesses for breakfast. From that lesson, I conclude she doesn't want a princess doll. She wants something different. Enter the story of Ugly Dolls. So Ugly Doll was created by David Horvath and Sunmin Kim. He was an art student. He sat down in his chair, and he wanted so badly to say hello to Sunmin, who was sitting next to him, and ask her name, but he was always too nervous. He could never quite do it. One day, though, he's like, this is my day. This is the day I'm going to talk to her. He sits down, and then the teacher comes in and says, hey, everyone, today we're going to draw a naked model. Here she is. Oh, damn it. You can't draw a naked woman and be like, so you want to go out later? Like, that's really weird. So instead, he draws an ugly monster. The teacher comes around, and she's like, what is that? And David told me, he said something like, ugly's the only real beauty that exists. And Sunmin said, oh, I kind of like that. Pretty soon, boom, relationship. Unfortunately, though, she was from South Korea, so when she graduated, she didn't have her visa situation. She had to go home. So he has to try and win her back. So he creates a love letter campaign, and he signs off each love letter with that ugly little monster. By Christmas time, she decides to learn how to sew, and she makes him the monster. He gets that, opens it up. He's ecstatic. He goes right to the comic book store to say, you know, my girlfriend, see, she's real. Wait a minute. The comic book store guy says, oh, that's awesome. I'll take 20. Well, this isn't really for sale. That's fine. I'll take 20. 20 becomes 40, becomes 60, becomes 100, becomes a $150 million business. They didn't go through Walmart. They didn't go through Toys R Us. They did everything differently, and people loved that about the little ugly doll. And actually, for myself, when I was interviewing David, I was trying to figure out how to propose to my girlfriend. And I was thinking, like, there's unrealistic expectations placed on a trend hunter for creativity, and it's not fair. So I took the little dolls, and then I recreated a little relationship all around the city. And here's the car tie-in. I said, I'll drive you where you need to go. I'll protect you from danger. See, that's a bike. I'll dance with you. She's dipping me. Don't read into it. I'll hold your hand. I'll do chores for you. I shouldn't have put that there. I'll give you space when you need it. She goes, that's not enough space. We'll bounce around. Wait, I got to skip that part. And then in the end, I got my yes, teaching me that divergence and pursuing the path less traveled can get you a wife. So there we go. The other thing I want to show you, got to get it off this reaction. You see me obsessed with the camera too much. Is that divergence can be rebellion, but it also is customization, personalization, status, fashionizing the product that you're creating. And the questions that you'd ask yourself would be, what do people hate about your industry? You could ask that if you're creating an example of a car design, but also if I'm thinking, how do I make an environment that gets that millennial excited to work at Ford in the stamping department? Well, I can get them excited about the new cars. And then the next part is, how could you be more customized, more unique, or different from the mainstream? Now, I have just one other story for you. It's still in the world of divergence, and it is the tale of Dietrich. So we'll conclude with good old Dietrich. He liked the good life. All he ever wanted to do was have fun. Proof point, it took him 10 years to finish school. And then he gets a job in marketing, because that's where the party's at. But fast forward in time, and fortunately, he's not at an auto company. He's pushing toothpaste. So he doesn't like that. And he can't help but notice that when he's traveling, he could spice his life up a lot more if he partied all night. So imagine going to Thailand, you party all night, and then he sees that the cab drivers have an addiction to something called Krating Dang. If I got addicted to that too, I could party all night. So pretty soon he's doing that, and then he comes up with the idea, you know what? Let's make this a business. So he bottles it up, has a little focus group, gets some people around, and the results come in, and they try his product, and they say, this tastes awful. This is disgusting. This is horrible. Is this cough syrup? What is this? You should go back to your day job. So what do you do if your product's horrible? Well, if everybody else has a big can, you have a small can. Then people will know it's special. If everybody else charges $1, maybe you should charge $3. Then they'll know there's something good in it. And if everyone else has multiple SKUs, you will have just one, creating more magical power about what's in that can. And if everyone else has a legal and compliance team and they can't sponsor cool stuff, you can. Just let's all hope the parachute opens. $6 billion later, Dietrich teaches us that opposing the mainstream fuels your success. And I could end this story there, but I was thinking like, this is manufacturing in America. This is my favorite industry. This is autos. If you want, I could give you the secret backstory of Red Bull, the one I got only after having a few beers with the #3 co-founder, but this is like a secret. You'd have to work for it. Do you guys want to know Red Bull's secret history? You need to work for it. Do you want to hear it? There we go. I felt like a preacher. All right, well, here's the secret. This guy here, Hans Vrains, he was a very successful marketer. He gets hired on, he starts his job, and they said, your job is to make this product go global. Great. What's my marketing budget? $2.5 million. All right, that's nothing. All right, okay, so wait, how did the focus group results come back? It said that it was horrible and awful. They really didn't like it. Great, you should have told me that in the job interview. Is there anything else I should know? Yeah, there's one little runaway thing we're hoping you can take care of. What's that? In Thailand, there's a runaway rumor that this comes from a bull testicle, so we need you to fix that. Or do we? They decide to put up an unmoderated website. Legal disclosure, we're not checking this thing. They make sure everyone in the world just knows that Red Bull absolutely must come from bull testicles. Then they expand into new countries. There will be a media uproar. The local FDA will investigate, and then they'll say, hey, by the way, FDA, this is actually like half a cup of coffee. It's fine. All right. Causes a big success. Win, 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 win in each country. But then one day there's a drunk driving accident, and Red Bull's mysterious ingredients are called into questions. How many vodka Red Bulls did they have that day? So they have to go to court, and they need a defense, and they figured it out. When the judge asked, they said, oh, yeah, we will gladly pull our product because we don't want people drunk driving. All we want to do, though, is let's do this as a nice combined effort, and let's make sure we pull all the other products that they mixed with their vodka that day. So you let Coca-Cola know, and then as soon as they pull their products, then we'll follow suit. All right, well, that's not going to happen. But we're going to ask that you do something while we investigate your claim. Would you put on for us, in the meantime, a warning label? Yes! A warning label. That's fantastic. What do you want this warning label to say? Not for teenagers? Yeah! What else should it say? Not for pregnant women? Oh, tangible proof that it works. I like it. And finally, don't mix with vodka. The recipe's on the label. So those are the warnings, and the extra part of this lesson to really conclude it is that Red Bull's not supposed to win. Coca-Cola and Pepsi, if you think they don't understand millennials, you're absolutely wrong. They have a marketing budget of $5.5 billion, the economy of Monaco and 45 other countries. If you put it in comparison, Red Bull's launch budget would have been enough to buy that house in Palo Alto. So the reason why they win then is because Coke and Pepsi have rules, policies, procedures, brand standards, and that makes them predictable. And a predictable opponent is someone that you can diverge from, and that's what created Red Bull's success. Chaos creates predictable opportunity. And I'm going to leave here and challenge you with a couple ideas to help you get better and faster. I have a website for you, trendhunter.com/secret/Siemens. And if you go there, there's $1,000 of free stuff for everyone. I have a trend report that's visual with a couple hundred auto tech trends, which you guys might like. I have a free digital copy for you of my last award-winning book. I like to say it's half pictures, so you know it's good. Plus a whole bunch of other research, and you can contact me there to follow up. And there's the homework questions that you can take back to your office. So feel free to share that out. It's trendhunter.com/secret/Siemens. And what I want to leave you with more than anything is the idea that your breakthrough is so much closer than you think. And there are patterns and clues pointing you in the right direction. But never forget that it's your own success that actually blocks you from realizing your true potential. So be curious, be insatiable, be willing to destroy, and you will help make manufacturing in America be better and faster. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Jerry.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, man. Well, what do you think of this morning's speakers? Great round of all four of them. Phenomenal job. Thank you. So as we said in the beginning, this is your event. This is not a Siemens event, Electro-Matic. This is the community's event. So we'd love to hear the feedback. on what you think worked, what you'd like to doesn't work, what you'd like to see at the next event that we do. In addition to that, we're going to try something in the spirit of Jeremy, try a new idea. How do we keep the collaboration going? So we're going to be doing a automotive manufacturing forum that takes place every 3 months. We have a booth down on the main level that you can get more information on. But we encourage you to help us help the community continue to collaborate. And let's figure out what that is. We're not quite sure, so we're just going to go and experiment and try it with this forum, and we'll adapt as we go. So please take a look at that and participate with that. What we have next is we're going to have lunch down on the main floor, and we'd like to continue our collaboration down there. And again, thank you very much.